to Grid Live Wrap Up. Formula One, Imola, Max Verstappen, domination. Haven't we heard that before? But a lot to talk about. Plus, a quick recap of World Rally Championship and Formula E. Week 7 of the Grid ranking officially out. I'm Joe Samaniego. With me, we have Nicole Fry from Fans in Focus Media and Tanner Smith, editor from pitboxpress.com. A big thank you to our Patreon investors. Calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in the Grid Network. Link in the video description to invest through Patreon. We also welcome Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube Super Chats right here on the Grid Network on YouTube. Subscribe, hit that bell icon, and give us a thumbs up if you like our content. And of course, gridnetworktv.com. Lots of articles, including Matthew Bro, who will be recapping the All-Star race for NASCAR later today. And of course, we'll be on the air later today to preview the NASCAR All-Star race. But Nicole, Tanner, let's get started with Formula One. A beautiful move by Max Verstappen at that beginning of that race, going on the outside to take the lead away from Oscar Piastri on lap 1. If that move didn't seal the win, I think the virtual safety car did. Easy pit stop, allow Max Verstappen to just go in there, get the changes. That was caused by Esteban Ocon car stopping for mechanical issues. He never looked back, even when we had a safety car for Kimi Antonelli. He just, again, nothing the McLarens or anybody could do on a day where Piastri, the points leader, finished third behind Lando Norris due to older, hard tires. Verstappen gained 10 points on Piastri instead of the 7. And one of the big things, Nicole, is this a reminder to everyone that Max Verstappen shouldn't be counted out of this driver championship picture yet?
I think this race was an excellent reminder that you can never count Max Verstappen out of anything or Red Bull. I think it's really important to note that while Max had a phenomenal drive, his team had some amazing calls and some great luck when it came to strategy. And the combination of all three just really shows just how dominant they've been and how confident they are in their car, in their team, and in their driver, which for many of the other teams behind Red Bull at the moment, that's where they're struggling in one of those three. And so I think this was just a really good reminder for all of the fans watching at home that when it comes to Max Verstappen, anything is possible. And when it comes to Red Bull, they are never going to go down without a fight.
I think I'm going to possibly play some devil's advocate here, which is not normally what I do. So I think that with this Red Bull 21 car, I don't think that it handles dirty air very well. And, you know, obviously props to Max there for that whole shot victory that he got over Piastri. It was a very impressive and robust move, and he managed to not shove someone off the course when he did it. So it was very impressive in that regard as well. I just think that with, you know, everything going on with McLaren today, I think that Norris probably may have had a shot at Max, or at least would have been within DRS of him over the last 10 laps had the McLarens kind of orchestrated a bit of a swap there towards the ending of the safety car, but unfortunately that is not what ended up coming to pass. And I just think that if you can get Max Verstappen out of the top 2 qualifying positions, he is not going to win a race. I have not seen him make a pass on a McLaren on speed and hunt them down. And until I see him do that, I'm not going to take him seriously as a championship threat. And that may be a bit harsh, but I mean, look at the 2 wins that he has. He started on pole in Suzuka, led practically the whole race. He gets the lead in turn 1 effectively here at Imola, wins the race. There's a pretty consistent theme, I think, with the victories Max Verstappen has picked up this season. And granted, that's not to discount what he did today. It was a very phenomenal run, especially with how he was able to pull away from the McLarens, which he was not able to do in Suzuka. So maybe there is, you know, some improvement that's been building in the Red Bull camp, but I'm not going to be, you know, giving them too many props just yet. I need to see them actually hunt a McLaren down and pass it before I can truly tip my cap to them that they're a championship threat.
Yes, but that is leading with the expectation that the championship winner will have to beat the McLaren and that the McLaren will not fail mid-season. that I think is an interesting factor to consider because we don't know how these McLaren drivers or the McLaren teams or engines are going to do after the summer break. And I'm super excited to see how that would potentially affect a championship run because it's not just a game of like outrunning everybody, it's outlasting everybody while you're doing so. And I'm so excited to see how that's going to play out, especially this season as teams stop development and really start focusing on the new regulations in 2026.
New regulations 2026. Everything you're all saying is great. I have to ask this follow-up question because you briefly brought it up, Tanner. We had a safety car about 10 laps ago, 9 laps ago, came in, and we saw Lando get around Oscar Piastri. Knowing the championship picture, I know it would have been hard for right away after the safety car to have Lando return the position back to Oscar. But starting with you, Tanner, on this one, do you think McLaren, especially as we got closer to the end of the race, should have said, hey, Lando, big picture, we need you to give Oscar the opportunity to get second place?
Oh, way too early in the season for that, in my opinion. I did think about that, and I don't think that would have been beneficial to Lando's race at all. And I just think it's too early in the season to be swapping when, like, you pitted Norris for a reason. Like, why would you give him fresh tires to just sit behind his teammate in third? That just doesn't make any sense. So, no, I think the optimal strategy there would have been to have pit Oscar as well. I know that would have probably been a double stack, and that's, obviously not, an optimal strategy, but during the safety car probably would have been beneficial to both of them to put on some fresh rubber, have Albon, I guess, between them and try to see what they can do from there.
Yeah, it would have been really interesting to see how that would have played out. I do agree with you, Tanner. I do think it's way too early in the season to be making those calls. Not because necessarily it was a wrong call to make. I think it really was a coin toss, but just because it leaves such a bad taste in everyone's mouth. It just puts that bad, like, energy, I guess, for lack of better words, in the atmosphere of the team. Like, no one wants to be walking like on pins and needles around their own teammates, unsure of what they can say or do this early in the season. And I think McLaren is smart enough to know that, especially after some of the controversy when it came to calls last year, that is not something their drivers need. And the more internal pressure they put on their drivers, the worse they tend to perform. So a call like that could have just been devastating to their championship run.
Yeah, way too early. I have to make that anonymous agree with you all. And I think, like you said, Nicole, I still remember when Rubens Barrichello had to give that position to Michael Schumacher so late in Austria. It really leaves a sour taste in everyone's mouth. Yes, we know this is part of the sport. Yes, we know it happens, but I think people would have been upset if they saw, okay, last lap, Lando's slowing a lot. Here comes Oscar. Oh, that would have been a lot of people talking about the controversy with that. Now, of course, next week, Monaco, the big crown jewel of F1, big race weekend with Indy 500, Coke 600. So excited for that race. And you have to be on that front row to win the race. And Tanner, to your point, you mentioned about Max Verstappen being that first two rows. Can Verstappen put the car on pole next week in Monaco? Because we know really the pole sitter and second place are the best two to get that win.
Why not? Like I said, the Red Bull is exceptional in clean air when Max Verstappen can, truly dictate where the car is going to go. Anytime that car reaches any sort of turbulent air, it flaps in the wind and can't go anywhere. So as long as Max Verstappen can get a, set of 3 good clean laps in next week, I think it's entirely possible he gets on the pole. And at that point, yeah, it's Monaco. Unfortunately, the track doesn't really produce the racing we all would love to see it have, especially given what it's up against in the Coke 600 and the Indy 500. But yeah, I think that it's entirely possible he gets a pole next week. I would not count him out of it, but I mean, the Ferraris are definitely going to be something to contend with next week. We got 2 Monaco winners in that stable now. So, yeah, I definitely think that Verstappen can get pole next week, but I think there could be more than 2 teams at play for that pole position.
I agree. I think Monaco's going to be a very interesting race all around, not just with so many past winners of Monaco and so many decent cars who could land themselves on pole position, but also with so many rookies on the grid who have never been to Monaco before. I think this is something I'm going to bring up a lot this season, and I know I've brought it up in the past, but having so many young drivers who have maybe not had the experience needed to perform incredibly successfully, especially in possibly tricky conditions at Monaco or other tracks, is going to be, I think, a really important factor in everything we see. I would not be surprised if we have at least 2 or 3 safety cars in Monaco between, the entire weekend, and even possibly just the race, we could see multiple safety cars as well, depending on how the cars and all of their drivers behave and if they feel like really pushing the boundaries or whether or not they play it safe in Monaco, which I think some are a little inclined to do. Others, I think, just want to go out and drive as fast as they can. And Monaco is a great track to do it. So we'll see if they become a little bit, too overzealous, for lack of better words.
I feel like it's been a couple of years since we've had a Monaco with a bit of a craziness element. You bring up with all those rookies. Might be overdue for a race where you're going to have 2 to 3 safety car periods. Of course, if we have wet weather, that just throw in another layer. The safety car we saw today for Kimi Antonelli, that alone shook up the race, at least when it came to the race order. Besides Max Verstappen, the biggest battle we saw after that, Alex Albon trying to get 4th place from Charles Leclerc, who really benefited from the strategy of everything. But it got up where people are talking about. Albon tried to make a move on the outside, pushed wide to the gravel, and I was surprised that F1 TV commentators were claiming it was fair game, even though it looked from the onboard that Albon was clearly ahead as they were entering the corner. However, one of the big things may point to Albon get into position because Charles Leclerc team radioed to him, give the position to Alex Albon. Concerns of a 5-second penalty. We were just having about a 9-lap dash to the finish, so 5 seconds could have been really brutal for that team, Nicole. What's the move that Charles Leclerc do trying to defend the position? Do you feel that was wrong, and would a penalty be warranted?
I don't think Leclerc's move was wrong in any means. I think it was just good racing. I think the timing of it was incredibly unfortunate for Ferrari as a whole. I think this is a call that, had it happened, or a situation had it happened earlier in the race, the call probably would have gone to the stewards for a full debate, and they would have waited to see what was going to happen because it kind of was right on the edge. From some angles, it did look like that Charles Leclerc had, more of his car into that corner than Alex Albon, and therefore he would have kind of the right of way. On other angles, it very clearly showed kind of the opposite. And I think the stewards would have taken a very long time to go back and forth, which is something Ferrari did not have. They did not have any time whatsoever. So I think as a team, they decided to just make the call internally. They would rather play it a little bit safe and not risk losing any more points than they already potentially could have. And I think for them in that situation, it was probably the right decision. And I know that's really difficult to say, but I do think that Ferrari walking away with both of their drivers in some points is better than walking away with just one of their drivers, potentially with a couple.
Yeah, I definitely agree that Leclerc and Ferrari made the right move to at least give the spot back before the end of the race to avoid potentially any penalties. Do I think it was right or fair what Charles Leclerc did? No. Was it against the rules? I don't know. I think that based on what we've seen thus far in this Formula One season, even being ahead at the apex doesn't really matter anymore. So it's really just up to the discretion of which stewards are running the show that week. I don't think Leclerc gave Albon any room off of the corner. I don't like seeing that. I've expressed that multiple times this season that I just don't think that's racing. But at the end of the day, that's Formula One in 2025 to this point. If someone's on your outside, you can just pretend they're not there, and most of the time you get away with it scot-free. So, yeah, it's just one of those things where what Leclerc did was legal, but I don't like it. And I would really prefer if we just change some rules around to, enhance the sportiness of this sport. Because right now we're kind of inching towards a crossroads situation where someone at some point is going to get pushed off of a track and then rejoin and crash into their competitor that pushed them off. It's going to happen. This can't keep happening amongst these 20 great drivers and there not be a big mistake like that happens. Like, we're just inching closer and closer to disaster, and the longer and longer we go on without doing anything about it, it's just not going to get any better. So while I don't think what Leclerc did was technically by the rule book wrong, I think it was not a very sporting move and not a very sportsman move. So I don't think he would end up getting a penalty for it because of the kind of duality of perspectives that Nicole kind of displayed for us, where, sometimes Albon was ahead and in other angles, Leclerc was ahead. So don't think he would have been penalized, but I really just did not care for that move and would really prefer if it gets penalized going forward, though I know it won't.
It is something that has become less and less black and white, just more shades of gray. And like you said, so many factors of should a penalty be called, who was at front. Oh, man, it would be nice if it was cleaned up a bit. Overall, I think Ferrari, knowing that the stewards could have been looking at this for quite some time, having deliberation, the last thing we would want is breaking news 2 hours later. 5-second penalty. So now Charles Leclerc is 7th or whatever. I think it was really smart on Ferrari to do that. Just a tough break and a little bit of that hard racing, as you said. I felt Albon could have really pushed the issue if he didn't give ground, but we could have had that wreck, and the next a race ended under caution. All sorts of potential that could have happened. We are now 7 races into the season, and keeping on our topic of Alex Albon, he finished it ahead of Carlos Sainz, despite Carlos Sainz starting 1 position ahead of Albon. Entering the race, Alex Albon was 8th in the points and Sainz 13th in the points. Right now, the way it's looking, Albon, he is comfortably ahead of Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz has moved up to 11th with 11 points total, but Alex Albon, 8th, has 40 points, so comfortably ahead. Some would say some of it has been luck. Australia comes to mind, of course, where Carlos Sainz crashed out. But Tanner, are you surprised that Albon is that far ahead of Sainz in the driver's standing?
Not really. While I think that I rate Carlos Sainz to be a better driver overall than Alex Albon, obviously has more accolades and wins to his name, but I do think a lot of that comes from being in better equipment for longer than Alex Albon. I think we forget that Alex Albon has 2 years prior to this in this seat with Williams. So he's had 2 years to develop a rapport with the team, the engineers, etc. And, they kind of focused on him a lot in the past couple of seasons with Logan Sargent and then Franco Colapinto being his teammates. He kind of became the number 1 driver at that team basically by default. So I think that Sainz coming over, obviously moving over from his Ferrari time, and, obviously he's been with, as he pointed out earlier this year, half the teams on the grid. I just think that it's going to naturally take you a little bit longer to ingratiate yourself with the team and get up to speed. So in my opinion, it's not really a surprise to this point that Sainz is not quite level with Albon, but I do think as this year wears on, that margin should close a little bit, and probably by this time next year, they should be about even on pace.
Yeah, I would agree with Tanner. I think that it's not a surprise to me that Alex Albon is doing so well just because of how comfortable he is with this team and just how rough of a transition that can be swapping team to team. And I think when it comes to Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon, they are very comparable drivers in their foundations. I think Carlos Sainz has had a lot more time in better machinery just to get used to a higher standard in that sense, and that for the first time in quite a while we're seeing Alex Albon also get a taste of that. Williams has developed a very amazing car this year, at least so far this season, and to see both of them adapt to it so quickly, it's like watching ducks swim in water. It is just coming so naturally and they're working so hard at it. It's been a real pleasure, and I think it brings, at least for me, a lot of joy to see Williams doing so well, because for most of us they're kind of a comfort team. They're just a team that has been around forever, great history, great drivers, great team members, and to see them finally succeeding in the way we all want them to has just been such a joy.
It's been
Couldn't
great.
agree more.
Yeah, it's been great to see what they've been doing from what they were back in the 90s with Mansell and just the domination 1992. They've had Juan Pablo Montoya wins, but just missing that championship element. Of course, Ferrari doing unstoppable. Here we are now where F1 pretty competitive, see them competitive as well too. I mean, there was a point it looked like we could have a surprise podium for Albon in the race, but just the way the race played out wasn't meant to be. I would not be surprised if we do see Williams in the podium this year. I think somebody even made that prediction during one of our roundtables preseason, so it'll be interesting to see. In the chat room, can we please go back to calling the race the San Marino Grand Prix? It's a lot easier for us to remember. Be it easier hashtag too as well. Any thoughts on San Marino, the name of the race, or is it just one of those deals where, hey, as long as we're coming here, we should be pretty happy about that?
Yeah, I don't really have much comment on that. I mean, if it makes things easier for other people, then maybe we should move it back. But like, I don't really have a take on that.
I'm in the same boat. I'm like, I think about it and I'm like, maybe. I don't know. I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, I know the nostalgia of the San Marino Grand Prix. I know looking up, they use the hashtag Imola GP, which is pretty simple. We'll see. It really depends on what's going to happen to the future of this track, which we'll talk about later on. One driver I was surprised to hear some people questioning his future was Yuki Tsunoda. He went from 20th place, well, technically pit road, to 10th, so he took home 1 point. He had that huge crash Q1, rolling the car upside down on top of the tire barriers, just destroyed that car. Kudos to that team putting it all together to make it work. I think everyone knows I was traveling this week, but during the race podcast, I was surprised to hear them very critical of Yuki's crash and indicate that he was under pressure to perform already. He has 5 races in his Red Bull tenure, 3-point finishes, 1 finish outside the top 10, and of course the DNF at Saudi Arabia, contact between him, Pierre Gasly. Nicole, I think everyone knows the story of the second seat of Red Bull. Yuki Tsunoda again, this opportunity. But how would you grade Yuki Tsunoda's first 5 races? And do you agree he's in the hot seat?
Oh, so I'm gonna take this a little bit in reverse order. As far as Yuki being in the hot seat, I think yes. I think anyone who is in that second seat at Red Bull is in a little bit of a hot seat, especially in a season where there's already been driver swaps, there's already been changes, and there's been so much chatter about his future and just the future of Red Bull and that second seat in general. I don't think it's anything against Yuki personally. I think just that curse of the second seat is living very heavily in people's minds at the moment, and because of that, that does add a lot of pressure. As far as grading Yuki's first couple of races with the team, I think he's done a pretty okay job so far, all things considered. When you take the fact that he was a mid-season swap, that he hasn't really spent a ton of time in those cars, And the fact that he is, like most of the drivers, still getting used to a team, but has had less races to do so. I think his performance, especially today, was quite impressive. I think after such a terrifying crash, most of us would kind of tuck our tails between our legs and just be very hesitant, be overly cautious about getting back on track. But we saw no hesitation from Yuki today. He got in the car and he did what he needed to do. He got points. And I think for Red Bull, that today at least should definitely be enough.
So I definitely lean towards Nicole in this regard. I think that his first 5 races have actually been rather a bit of a pleasant surprise. I feel like when Liam was in the car, in comparison, the car had no pace whatsoever and couldn't pass. And I feel like the thing that surprises me so much about what Yuki is able to do in this car is that he is able to pass with it. And I haven't really seen Max be able to do a whole lot of that himself. So it's been, I think something that's beneficial for the team to have someone that, isn't quite on Max's level by any stretch, have to dig it out of the mud, so to speak. He is constantly starting in the 15th to 8th bracket practically every week, so he's having to make a lot of hard overtakes, and he is successfully doing that more often than not. Obviously, that Gasly incident notwithstanding, but overall, I would give Yuki a B- to this point. I don't think that he should be on the hot seat, but Helmut Marko is a very stubborn and goofy man, so I really wouldn't be surprised if he was. So I think Yuki is performing better than people are giving him credit for, considering how many struggles Max has had to make passes in this vehicle. So I think that Yuki should probably get more benefit of the doubt and a little bit more grace in this situation than he's been given by the media. And I think that overall he'll probably finish the season there, because I'm going to be honest, as much as I like Isaac Hadjar, I don't see him moving into that seat, and I don't think that would be a good idea for his development either. So I think the best course of action here would be to finish the season out with Yuki and kind of see where the cards fall, because at this point, since Yuki got in the car, Verstappen's performing better. He's won twice since then in the 5 races that we've run, and could have won at Saudi Arabia as well had he not run off the track. So yeah, I think that Red Bull overall is better because Yuki is in that car, and I think it would behoove that team to keep him there for the rest of the year, just to kind of see where everything shakes out.
Interesting points. Yuki Tsunoda, of course, that 10th place finish, one valuable point really going to add up when you look at the driver standings. Yuki Tsunoda 12th right now, 10 points, 1 point behind Carlos Sainz. He's already got ahead of Isaac Hadjar, who's a lot of people have said it's really been off to an impressive start considering he's with VCARB. I'm overall surprised that I thought, I get it, it's Red Bull. There's always pressure to perform, but considering where they were after their first 2 races, I think they're making the right steps. And I mean, we're talking about potentially Max Verstappen being a contender for the Drivers' Championship. Overall, I think that's really good. One driver that I think surprisingly is not having that good a start like many anticipated, finishing 11th place, and he was frustrated on the radio today. Fernando Alonso, the Aston Martin, he still has 0 points this season. That is something I don't think a lot of people would have predicted, especially since we know his teammate has scored points. When you look at the standings, you look at what Lance Stroll has done. Lance Stroll 10th in the points at 14 points, so just 3 ahead of Carlos Sainz. Nicole, starting with you, we talked about grading Yuki Tsunoda's first 5 races. For Fernando Alonso, will we say it's pretty low grade considering it's pointless still?
Yes, unfortunately, and it breaks my heart. It truly does. I would love to see Fernando Alonso on a podium. I thought we were like this close to getting it today. I was so excited. I was about to run to my closet and rip out my Fernando Alonso jersey. Unfortunately, that never happened. And to see him still pointless after so many Grand Prix, I almost don't have words for it, especially since we have his teammate who historically has not performed as well as Fernando Alonso, beating him consistently every single weekend. And props to Lance Stroll for dragging that tractor to the points every weekend. I just wish Fernando Alonso had the opportunity to do so. And I think the worst part is I can't pinpoint a clear reason as to why. Every single race weekend, it seems like there is just like this little glimmer of hope, and it just keeps passing him by. And there's no really rhyme or reason. I don't know if it's just bad luck or if it's team calls or what exactly is happening to Fernando Alonso, but I need him and Aston Martin to get it together a little bit, because the fact that he still doesn't have points right now is incredibly disappointing. I would say it is like a D minus. Like, we are not even passing at this point.
Yeah, I think pointless, which is what he is in the point standings, and that's kind of also a good summation of his season. He's just been kind of out there without really any sort of a point to it. And it's starting to get kind of hairy for Aston Martin as a whole, especially because they have some big decisions that possibly need to be made coming up here shortly. Alonso still has another year on that contract extension that he received, and I don't foresee him playing it out at this rate. He's wrecked out of several events at this rate and is just not really showing any sort of pace. The strategy obviously hasn't been up to snuff either, but yeah, it would have been nice to have seen Alonso get a little bit better of a strategy shake today than he got. I just feel like they did not take advantage of that great starting spot that they got. And that to me is a bit more of a, mark against the team than it is the driver. But still, even with that in mind, I haven't seen Alonso make the moves, show the pace that you need to compete in this series. And granted, he would know what it would take to compete in this series. And yeah, it's not good. We obviously saw one veteran kind of reclaim their glory a bit today, and we saw another one kind of fall to the wayside a little bit. So, not looking great for Alonso going forward. I'm definitely aligning with Nicole. He hasn't wrecked out of every race, so I can't give him an F, but I can give him a D minus because that's about what he deserves.
Yeah, Alonso not having a good year. A lot of big questions for that team next year. And of course, next year, we don't know if we'll be in Imola. This is the final year of the Imola contract with F1 currently. F1 returned back in 2020. Pandemic, needing tracks to host events. And this track has seen plenty of history, good and bad, in F1. Big fan favorite because of the history of that. But with the current F1 cars, very narrow the track. They're much bigger, the cars. Not exactly producing the track product, I would say, the modern F1 fans expect to see. And now F1 is talking about rotating tracks to like maybe every other year. I would not be surprised if there's a track once every 3 years, just because we know the demand for F1 is going to keep growing. Tanner, with Imola, is it likely to be that track that's going to be on a rotation basis round? But would you think the 2026 car be a step to improving the race product at Imola?
I mean, I think we all certainly hope so. And we hope that it translates to every racetrack. But until, we start seeing some cars hit the circuit and explore those regulations, I don't think we really have like a frame of reference to pull from. I thought the race today was actually pretty sporty, second on back. Personally, I think that we saw a ton of passing today. Now, granted, a lot of that had to do with pit strategy, but that's how most passes are generated in F1, let's be honest. So I am not typically a fan of this track. I think that last year's event is a pretty clear picture into the kind of race that we have come to expect here at Imola. And as much as it does, have that historical factor, I don't think that it's really worthy of staying on for, every single season and would probably work better as a rotation, whereas somewhere like Spa, that should probably be on the circuit every single year, and we don't really need 3 American races. I'll just throw that out there too. But yeah, I definitely think that, given the regulations that we have, that, should bring the competition a little bit closer together. I think those should enhance some of the racing at a track like this where it's a little bit more narrow, but even still, it's really hard to say anything definitive without, seeing these cars in action.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting kind of rotation potentially we see with some of these tracks. I think the 2026 cars should help and improve some of these tracks that are struggling just because they are so old and so narrow. That being said, I think there's a lot of other factors that are going to go into what we could potentially see as track rotations. First and most importantly, I would say we have to keep at least one Formula One race in Italy. And if I have to go between Monza and Imola, I think Monza needs to be updated first because while the racing on track is pretty good, the experience trackside can be quite brutal for fans. And I think that is going to be a really big factor in what tracks get rotated out first. It's not just what we see on track, it's all of the things off track that make it so fans either want to come or don't want to come. Because if fans don't spend money to go to a racetrack, the whole point of racing there is kind of pointless. So I think that's going to be a really big factor that we have to consider. And I do think Imola is going to stay in rotation a little bit longer than Monza just for this reason. That being said, the track absolutely needs updates. I think Tanner said it so well that this year was kind of a surprise. We were all very actually kind of happy to see some of the racing and overtaking we saw today. That's typically not what we get anymore, and that is disappointing. So I think Formula One as a whole is going to have some really big decisions to make when it comes to the tracks they do and possibly do not keep, and how long they stay on or off of the rotation that we could potentially see in the future.
And if I can just jump in, just to clarify this for everyone, because I needed it a little bit more clear for me. Basically, the 2026 regulations have the width of the car down about 4 inches and the length of the car shrink down about 8 inches. So that should, in theory, produce better racing because the cars should be a little bit harder to handle because they are a narrower frame. Obviously, again, before we see cars hit the track, it's impossible to really speculate, but in theory, this should be better.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Fingers very crossed.
I mean, that's the thing I think about today. If those cars were, 4 inches shorter, 8 inches when you have 2 cars side by side, the chicane could have seen probably a little bit more passing opportunities, but so many what if factors, of course, when you bring in a new car. And I really like the point you brought, Nicole, that besides just a track product, the fan experience has to be something factored in. I mean, even the United States here, I think with NASCAR, we could agree there's some tracks, they're just so far away from major cities. It's hard to get there where you have a track like Chicago, Las Vegas, Kansas, people will flock there because of the track product. Monza, the history there, but if you're in that standard room environment and it's just a hassle to get there, it's like F1 would like to see some improvements made for the fans there, especially when you have places like Las Vegas, Miami. I mean, Montreal has done some upgrades as well too. It'd be really interesting to see how F1 will go with that starting next year. And next year, of course, Lewis Hamilton, all the assumptions he'll still be with Ferrari. And today, had his best Grand Prix finish with Ferrari, 4th place. If anything had gone wrong with one of the McLarens or penalty, he could have been up there in the podium. He has that sprint win in China, but still behind Leclerc on pace overall. Nicole, seeing today's results, the progress we're seeing, should the expectation for Lewis Hamilton be top 5 finishes?
Oh, I don't think so. I just don't know if Ferrari's cars have the pace to warrant that. I think Lewis Hamilton as a driver could absolutely pull that off depending on his car. I just don't think Ferrari has produced a car that is conducive to that at the moment. I think that could change. I do have hope that Ferrari is furiously developing as quickly as they can to get to that position where both of their drivers, both Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, can be consistently in the top 5 every single race weekend. But it's going to take a couple more weeks to get there if they're actually able to do so. I think I will start becoming a little bit more optimistic if we continue to see improvement, especially as we approach the summer break.
Yeah, I'm definitely in alignment with Nicole on this, that as much as it pains, I'm sure, many LH fans that, we're talking about top 5 being like the ceiling on a day. And, it's just impossible to even like reckon with that. I do think that Nicole's right, that the car really just doesn't have the capability to pull either Leclerc or Hamilton up there, despite how great of drivers they both are. I think that it would be very beneficial if they can come out of June with a lot more speed. But right now, I just think that getting both cars on the points and, out of the single point is probably a more achievable target. I will say I was very impressed by both of them today. I think that it would have been easy to see both of them just get mired in traffic and give up, essentially, which I feel like kind of happened in China to some extent. Granted, those results didn't even matter because they both got disqualified, but still. Regardless, I find that, obviously going to Monaco, we're not going to learn anything there about, anybody's pace. It's going to be about who gets into turn 1 first and keeps their car clean, mostly. But I think that Ferrari, if they can, build off of this run today, I think that top 5 should absolutely be the goal. But again, Monaco next week, where it's going to be practically impossible to pass, you're not going to really learn anything there. Not going to be able to pull anything from Imola to Monaco, more than likely. So I do think that, coming out of the summer break should probably be where Ferrari targets big improvements and hopefully an enhancement in speed.
Gonna be interesting to see how things shape up, because Ferrari today they were looking okay, but like you said, I just don't feel the car exactly has that pace for top 5 finishes consistently. Just a matter of improving it each and every week. And of course, we'll be here all season long right here at Grid Never. Subscribe and hit that bell icon as we also follow the grid ranking, and not a whole lot of shakeup. Taking a quick look at the top 10, Oscar Piastri maintains 5th place, but Max Verstappen has climbed up to 10th place in the grid ranking. Oliver Rowland moved up to 6th after a win and a 2nd place finish in the Tokyo E pre-weekend. Elfyn Evans has gotten around Sebastian Ogier, despite Ogier winning the rally in Portugal. That's his 7th Rally Portugal race win, and in his 3 starts of 2025, 3 podium finishes, 2 wins, and a 2nd place outside the top 10. Lando Norris is up to 11th, and Charles Leclerc has moved up to 34th. He is in the grid ranking. Kimi Antonelli dropped out after he dropped out of the race. The remaining Royal Rally Championship drivers, you look at them, they're outside the top 15. However, Formula E, the remaining drivers are all outside the top 25, as Oliver Rowland's 4 wins already in the 9 races there, starting to pull ahead, cement his spot in the top 10, and Jake Dennis has moved into the grid ranking as well. Full recap this weekend will be coming on the Encore show, as we will recap the NASCAR All-Star race. Later today, Tanner and I will be previewing the All-Star race. Now it's time for what we call the One Shiny Moment. We encourage everyone to share your shiny moment from the race weekend. We know we have Formula 1 majority of the show, but we also have Formula E, World Rally Championship, and there's any other motorsports shiny moments. Encourage everyone in the chat room, share them with us. Nicole, starting with you, what is your shining moment?
See, this is hard, and I'm gonna take a moment to be sentimental and actually go off track a bit. I think my shining moment for the entire race weekend was actually seeing Kimi Antonelli bring his classmates into the Formula One paddock. And there is a point to this, I promise. It's not just because I think it's adorable and sweet. I think that motorsports has shifted a lot in the last couple of years, and it's, I think, finally starting to embrace a younger generation of fan. And I think the real shining moment and pinnacle of that we saw this weekend with Kimi Antonelli bringing his friends into the paddock, and never once did anyone criticize him for doing so. I think in the past, Formula One has been a sport where if you're not like a hardened, seasoned athlete, if you are not completely aggressive and mature, then you're failing at your job as a driver. And I think we're starting to finally see some of the teams embracing the fact that they are having children, for lack of better words, driving in these incredible cars, and embracing that, embracing the fact that young faces in the paddock is something that should be celebrated and not just kind of thrown away as like child's play. And I think that was incredibly heartwarming to see. And I think it means that the culture of Formula One is shifting in a really positive way. And as a fan who focuses on fan experiences and engagement and talks about like what fans can take away from motorsports, it was so amazing to see. So not an on-track moment per se, but something that I think is incredibly important, whether we really recognize the significance of it or not.
Yeah, I absolutely love that shining moment. I'm going to go with the guy who he took the ride from at Mercedes. I'm going with Lewis Hamilton. As much as he has faced a lot of scrutiny this season for the lack of pace in the Ferrari thus far, and has had his fair share of spats with his strategists, I feel like Lewis has, kind of weathered the storm, so to speak, and is starting to come out on the other side a little bit more. Made a lot of passes today, I believe came from outside the top 10 up to 4th, which at Imola, could you imagine saying that to somebody last year after that race? I just think that Lewis is hopefully starting to come into his own a little bit here with Ferrari, and this is a step in the right direction. But it's, not too much to sneeze at the guy right behind him. That would have been my other candidate.
Two great shiny moments. My shiny moment is going to come actually from over at the Formula E side, and that's Oliver Rowland. What a drive this guy is putting on together. Pole position, racing smart in a series notoriously known for inconsistency. Drivers winning one race, crashing the next race. Winning another race, nowhere in sight. He is putting together something we see on the level of Formula One, IndyCar, 4 wins in 9 races. What an effort. A second place finish as well in the race weekend of 2. Oliver Rowland is starting to pull away. They're now past the halfway point. The other teams are going to start running out of time. And before you know it, championship could be up. And overall, it's going to be really interesting to see how the teams respond in that. In the chat room, we got a couple of comments from Brian. We welcome you, Brian. The wing flex rule coming up in round 9 will be some teams as much as anything. Upgrades will keep coming this year if they eye on 2026, affecting some teams as much as I meant to say. We understand that. Nicole Tanner, before we go off the air, I think you bring us up a good point. This has been a big source of discussion, the flex wing rule. Overall, any thoughts when it comes to, as we're moving forward with the wing flex rule coming and how this could lead in 2026? Could this really change the dynamic? Because I feel like McLaren seems to be the team that benefits the most from wing flexing. Tanner, I'll start with you on that.
Yeah, McLaren's definitely taken advantage of that rule quite a bit, but I also feel like their engineers were talented enough to come up with it and are talented enough to come up with a solve for the gap that it's going to leave when it's gone. I don't think that it has been the sole reason why they've been so dominant over the past year, basically. But I definitely think that if they aren't careful, it could put a dent in their speed. But at the same time, like I said, they have a ton of talented engineers on staff that should be able to, kind of bridge that gap from what the flexi wing was able to kind of provide for them and they'll be able to come back in round 9 with a much better wing that, though it won't be as flexible, should be just fine to get the job done.
I agree. I think McLaren would actually be incredibly silly if they did not push that rule as far as they could. And I think a lot of teams wish they could have taken it to that extreme as well and gotten away with it. I think that's where a lot of the controversy lies, because if you're not pushing the rules to the point of breaking in Formula 1, then what are you doing as a team? You should be out there making every single move you can to make your team a winning team. And I think that McLaren is smart enough to develop that with the idea and understanding that eventually they're probably going to be asked to change it. This is not new for Formula One. We've seen this in the past with a million different parts on Formula One cars and a million different things in the sport. So I think that as we approach this change deadline, for lack of better terms, we will see McLaren come up with something that is hopefully just as good, because I'm sure, quite frankly, that they've been developing it this entire time. So I think time will only tell, obviously. We'll have to wait and see, but I have high hopes that this should not shake up McLaren's performances too much or give any other team a better advantage than what we've seen so far.
Gonna be interesting to see how it all shapes up, and of course, we'll be following F1 all year long right here on the Grid Network. Encourage everyone to subscribe, hit that bell icon, and of course, gridnetworktv.com across social media, as well as the Grid Ranking Endurance Performance Index, and pick a winner. Big weekend next weekend with the Indy 500, NASCAR Coca-Cola 600, and Monaco Grand Prix, plus MotoGP. Big thank you to our Patreon investors, Colin Michelle, Mark Brown, David Matthews, for investing in Grid Network, and everyone that has supported us through YouTube Super Chat and Buy Me a Coffee. Of course, we thank everyone for supporting our network. And as I mentioned, we'll be on the air later today. NASCAR All-Star Race preview, Grid Encore on Monday to recap the All-Star Race, plus all the other series they cover. Wednesday, Grid Tonight. Then we're going to be back again, Women in Motorsports pre-race show Saturday for Formula One. And the best part, of course, it's Memorial Day weekend. So Sunday, our special Indy 500 pre-race show for the 109th running of the Indianapolis 500. Plenty of storylines. Of course, a lot of people paying attention to the 4 drivers on the screen, where we're going to be previewing all the drivers. And of course, qualifying today, that last row shootout. Who's going to get the pole? A lot of action. Month of May, busy time for everyone, but a fun time. For Nicole and Tanner, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time.